You're listening to the ISF podcast for your organization's better cybersecurity. Your host, ISF CEO Steve Durbin, is an expert in leadership, business culture transformation, and cyber strategies for today's top enterprises. I'm producer Tavia Gilbert. Today, Steve speaks with psychologist Dr. Glen Moriarty, founder and CEO of 7 Cups, a free emotional support service with 570,000 trained volunteer listeners supporting users in 189 countries. Steve and Glen explore the origins of 7 Cups, its background and its global user base, and discuss why so many feel alone in a hyper-connected online world. Glen also explains the nature of the gift economy and how we can avoid getting addicted to technology.
Glen, hi. It's nice to have you on the podcast with me today.
It's great to be here, Steve.
Now, you're a psychologist and you're the founder and CEO of an organization called 7 Cups. Explain the concept of 7 Cups. Fascinating name. How does it work? What does it do?
So 7 Cups is a free emotional support service. So the basic idea is that most people just need to feel heard or understood when they're going through a hard time. We have 600,000 trained volunteers, 189 countries, 140 languages, and they just listen to people that want to be heard. And so that's like paraphrasing, summarizing, empathizing. The listeners try to imagine themselves as the other person, to see the world through their eyes, and then share back what they see.
Fantastic. And when did that start? What was the sort of driver behind it? If I think back to sort of the COVID pandemic years, clearly there was a whole range of issues that everybody had to navigate. Then, was that the thing that drove it, or did it exist before then? Give us a little bit of the backstory.
So we launched in 2013, quite a while ago, 12 years now. I am a psychologist. I was studying behavior that's offline that hadn't yet moved online. So I had another company that was an online learning company. And when I was a kid, learning was offline, and then it moved online. Dating was offline, then it moved online. And I was trying to figure out what is the human behavior that's offline that hasn't yet moved online.
Right.
And talking to my wife, who's a therapist, it occurred to me that the need to talk to somebody is the behavior that's offline that hadn't yet moved online. And of course, even then, our mental health stats were in pretty rough shape globally.
Yeah.
And then COVID, as you indicated, got significantly worse and still continues to be pretty bad overall.
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting that you pick up on this point about people's need to talk. I mean, one of the things that I constantly have to try to encourage people, not just in my own business, but also in other organizations that I come across, is that there's no getting away from the human interaction. There are so many challenges that are being, in my view, artificially created because we're so dependent on technology, on email, on social media, on whatever it might be. And this is where I always sound like a complete Luddite. I'm not. It's just that the simplest of tasks can be accomplished very, very quickly by talking to somebody. And that, it seems to me, can escalate into a complete parade of email traffic, of electronic interaction that is somewhat endless and normally ends up in people being exceptionally frustrated and indeed degrading or worsening the situation. Have I completely lost the plot? Am I barking up the wrong tree? What's your thoughts there?
No, I'm a big fan of human-to-human connection, for sure. I think it's absolutely critical. And I think, as you're indicating, when you're able to talk to somebody either through a video call or in person, there's so much that happens non-verbally and otherwise that allows you to make a quick connection. And then your projections, whatever you're putting on the person that's not real, don't really exist. So like when we started this conversation, I had some assumptions going in. And then I see that some of those assumptions were false just because we're chatting with each other.
Right.
Whereas, of course, in email or social media, you don't see the person's face. You don't see their reactions. All you can see is either the pictures or semantic text. And that's pretty easy to project upon. So if you have your own kind of issues, let's say you're socially anxious, which means you're afraid other people are talking about you or judging you, or you're clumsy socially, you can easily imagine that other people are interpreting you in that way, and they very well might not be at all. Or
right.
anxiety or depression, it's very common to think that other people are upset with the person. And so an email could just be a short email, could be a curt email, could be the person's busy, could be the person doesn't respond. And in that person's mind, they can be imagining, oh no, I did something and that person's mad at me, but it's just not accurate. And all that goes away with that in-person conversation.
Yeah, it does. Let's chat a little bit about addiction. Another one of my pet topics. I'm an addict when it comes to technology. I struggle very hard to disconnect. I'm not alone in that, obviously. So that's one element of it where you simply can't put it down. And then another element of that whole addiction and technology component is also then almost paradoxically a feeling of disconnection. So you're addicted to something, but you're disconnected. How can you actually employ technology in what you do, for instance, to help people struggling with some of those things?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I think it's even worse than what you're describing. And it's in the sense that it's required. Like you have to use the internet. You have to use your phone. If you think about traditional addictions like drug, alcohol use, just imagine in order to do work, you had to drink.
Right.
So obviously some of us are going to be more vulnerable than others to a technology addiction. You've probably heard the statement like the medium is the message. So social media is its own medium and email is its own medium. And there's a set of assumptive frameworks that are baked into the structure or the infrastructure of those sites. So for example, there was a viral post several years ago that was talking about like, if you think about LinkedIn, what kind of person is that? If you think about Snapchat, what kind of person is that? Or Facebook, what kind of person is that? Just like in real life, you get a sense whenever I'm around this person, I feel this way. Like the people bring a sort of weather, like Tavia is sunny and warm weather, right? You just feel good around her. Some people are heavy and more challenging. And so the creation of the websites and the parameters that they have influence how the person feels when interacting with them. And so technology, I think books are a technology. They're very old technology. Movies are a technology. And so technology can be used for good or bad.
Right.
And so the internet can be a source of amazing compassion and love, but it has to be deliberately designed that way. It won't happen by accident.
So how do you help people differentiate or distinguish between the good stuff and the bad stuff?
A lot of it comes down to that same weather analogy I just used of when you're talking with a friend, how do you feel when they're there? It's the idea of fruit. So if you're doing something and if you're binge watching like a ton of garbage stuff on Netflix or Amazon, you know how you feel. Like it's just not that rewarding or interesting. The conversation that emerges isn't that good. Whereas just the other day, there's a new Billy Joel documentary that's out. And so I watched it with my kids and my wife. It was a really nicely done documentary. And it gave us a lot of backstory on who he is and how his music was made and the meaning of it. And you could see like his genius and the ups and the downs of being a musical genius. And so the fruit of that was a very interesting and rich discussion. So a lot of it just comes down to what is the fruit or what is the impact of the technology in the person's life. And people just need to have a little, it doesn't have to be significant, but any kind of self-awareness, just like they might with a friend. Hey, this person that's coming over is like a negative Nancy. And every time they leave, I feel like super depleted and exhausted. Or when they call or text, it's, I don't really want to hang out with them again. Or like processed food, another analogy for technology. I'm eating all this food in these packages and it leaves me feeling both hungry and a little bit gross. And so I'm going to get an apple or I'm going to eat a salad or whatever. And maybe it's not initially super rewarding, but it ends up feeling nourishing. And so I think the key thing for people to ask themselves is, am I being nourished? Am I being satisfied by this technology?
I'm curious because you mentioned that you've got this global coverage with 7 Cups. Are you noticing any differences between the sorts of things that people are coming to you with, some of the challenges they're coming to you with, whether they be in one part of the world versus another?
Certainly there are cultural differences and different pushes and pulls, but humans, we're a lot similar. The way we read emotions are universal, so it doesn't matter where you live, the emotional expression is similar. Human societies are pretty similar, relationships are similar. There's different assumptions about I'm part of a more collective society or I'm part of a more individualistic society. But by and large, people generally struggle with feelings of sadness, feelings of worry, fear, and relationship difficulties.
Would it be fair to say that what you have created is a collection then of available, technologically facilitated online therapists to deal with all of the issues that we would normally be dealing with in person. So are you replacing that human interaction?
No. So the way to think about volunteers is like a family member or a neighbor or a friend, somebody that you can just talk to about what's on your mind. Volunteers are not doing therapy. Generally, therapy includes I'm going to diagnose you, and then I'm going to create a treatment plan, and then I'm going to track your progress. That's really what therapy is, whether it be online or offline. And we have online therapists on 7 Cups too, like telehealth, video-based therapy. And that's really just a mapping of what happens offline to online. But listeners are just listening, and they're all doing it with just text. So it's just messaging back and forth, communicating this sense of, this is what you're telling me. I'm understanding you. I'm hearing you. And the thing that makes therapy work the most is a thing called the therapeutic alliance. Mm-hmm. All that would mean is that you feel like I care for you. You feel like I'm on your side, and you feel like I understand you. That's the core of it. And so, of course, anybody can do that. Like a good friend, a family member, a neighbor can help you feel heard and understood. So there's this surplus in humanity of compassion to help people, but it's not easily connected. 7 Cups is something that we call as a gift economy, which just takes a surplus of compassion and matches it with this kind of great need that we have. Wikipedia is a surplus of editors and writers that gets matched with people that are interested in learning, this huge desire to learn. AA is a surplus of people that are further along in sobriety, helping people that are just starting. Open source software is a surplus of people that just like to code and create programs with people that need to use those open source programs. So it's definitely not replacing offline therapy. In fact, we send thousands of referrals to therapists offline regularly because therapists are super needed. The challenge we have in the mental health system, one of many, is a basic triage system. Like therapists should be seeing people that can't be helped by a volunteer or a family member or a friend. They should be helping people that are in higher levels or more complex levels of distress. And so in the States, part of the challenge is that you can think about it like a pyramid or a triangle. They're at the very top and it's all clogged up there. But if we could take some of the folks that can get help for free or low cost to other folks, then that opens up the channels for more people that really need help to get help by those expert professionals.
I think that triage that you talk about is a good way of looking at it. One of the other things I was going to say to you around that, just related to what we were talking about in terms of the addiction component piece, because in a therapist relationship, one of the things that the therapist is always conscious of is not creating an overdependence in the relationship. There has to be boundaries. There has to be very strong boundaries that are observed there. How do you create those, or do you need to create those in the sort of environment that you're talking about?
Yeah, the thing about therapy is generally a person's paying for it, and then they're chatting with just one therapist. So you don't really see multiple therapists. And so I think those are kind of the two variables. So from an ethics perspective, oftentimes it's, hey, when a client is doing better, it's time to discharge them, even though there's kind of payment associated with that relationship. And by and large, therapists generally do that. But there is a monetary incentive in some circumstances for people to continue to see clients that don't need to be seen any longer. But on 7 Cups, you can chat with the same person or as many people as you like. So it's not just a one-to-one relationship. It can be a one-to-many relationship, and you can participate in groups. So group support as well. 7 Cups is not a crisis service, but a lot of people reach out to us when they're in a significant amount of pain and they're going through a hard time. 40% of Americans report feeling lonely. I know in the UK, it's a similar number. Humans do not have a lot of social support in their offline lives, which is tragic. And so how do you help somebody get that support in a relatively easy way to help them get through whatever challenges they're facing? And that's a big part of what we do. And so you can chat with the same person, you can chat with multiple people, you can chat in a group. But the idea is that the original name was 7 Cups of Tea, and it was named after a Chinese poem. And it's like you're just having a cup of tea with a friend once a day. But another way to think about it is we all have cups, or we all have emotional bank accounts, and we need those to be filled up in order to continue to cope and manage things, especially when we're going through a tough time. But once a person is through the challenge, There's not a need. If you're starving, you want food. You can't pretend you don't want food, right? You got to eat that food. But once you're satisfied, you're good. Person going through a crisis or going through a tough time, they just need a lot of support. But then that subsides. You just don't need that anymore. And then if people are just like overusing the system, we have parameters that don't allow that to happen. So you can only make so many requests. You can only do so many things. So people don't abuse the platform. And then if a listener is listening too much, we prompt them regularly and say, hey, you've been on here for a while. Why don't you think about getting off and taking a walk or going outside or doing some mindfulness? So we do have those parameters baked in.
That's hugely important, of course. And that was one of the things, wasn't it, that we always had to encourage people to do during the COVID era, was actually take time away from the screen, focus on the mindfulness, go for a walk if you were able to. And I think, sadly, we've probably forgotten some of those things and we've reverted back to where we were before. One of the things I wanted to ask you was, obviously, the security industry, the one in which I work, is an industry where we're seeing probably too much burnout. We're seeing a lot of people working in hugely stressful conditions based on the fact that they always have to be available. It's a highly response heavy, in the moment type industry. Do you have specific groups within 7 Cups? Do you have a sort of security group? How does that work?
Yeah, we do. We have different groups and we have different forums. And so like part of what you're talking about would be something that we would call lived experience. So if you're a security professional, there's a whole bunch of things that I don't have to share. If I'm trying to get help from you, I don't have to share all of what that means. What does that mean for my family? What does it mean for my sleep? What does it mean for XYZ? Like you already have that knowledge. So we have forums for stages of life issues, different peer groups, different occupations, different mental health challenges, and groups for those things too, so that a person can be like, yeah, this is what's going on. And then they can get support from other folks that have also gone through that or can identify with that particular challenge.
And you mentioned as well that you operate in multiple languages, so there's no issue there either, no barriers from that perspective?
No, you have to know, you can translate the site. So when you go to the site, you can choose from a drop down of the language you want, and that changes most of the site to that language. You can search for listeners by language or country. And then once you have that, then you can chat with them in your own language.
Fantastic. So how do people actually find you, Glenn? So people listen to this and they're thinking, that's for me, I'd like to give it a go. Where would they go? What would they do?
So most people find us through referrals and through searches. So searches on Google, searches on ChatGPT or in AI. That's where we get the vast majority of our referrals. So it's just people that they might search like depression help or depression chat, or I'm anxious, or this thing's happening in my relationship. How can I figure it out? And then all those services refer to 7 Cups because we were the first free mental health service online. And so we got a ton of press all around the globe. And that's how we built the international workforce we have. It wasn't deliberate. It was like, hey, here's a free resource. And then a whole bunch of these people came to 7 Cups to get help. And then a certain percent of them converted to become listeners. Just a happy accident or happy unfolding of events.
But certainly meeting a need which unfortunately continues to grow in the world today. Glenn, it's been great talking to you, giving us a perspective on what it is that 7 Cups does. And certainly anybody who's listening to this who'd like to get in touch, as you've just pointed out, very simple, just go onto Google or ChatGPT or wherever it may be, and should be able to find you and then get started and hopefully benefit in the same way that all of your other users are doing. So thank you so much for spending time explaining what it is that you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Special thanks to this week's guest, Dr. Glen Moriarty. We'll be back with another new episode next week. In the meantime, if you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and we'd be pleased if you'd consider sharing the episode. To become an ISF member, get in touch with Steve directly at steve.durbin@securityforum.org or on LinkedIn. Check out all our media and resources. All of it is there to support you at securityforum.org. The ISF podcast is produced by Talkbox Productions and Tavia Gilbert. Thanks for listening.